So once I allowed the Lord to open the eyes and ears of my heart, Lord, you keep poking at this particular subject, and I'm still a little sensitive about this area, but speak, Lord. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Your servant is listening. He then begins to reveal to me what your husband, my husband, went through. And I'll continue to make this make sense. The deception that my husband was in by believing something that the enemy told him, something that the enemy spoke to him, that I wasn't his wife anymore, that he wasn't supposed to be married to me anymore. And he didn't know it was the enemy. But the way he believed that, God was using what I went through so I could have language and experience from his perspective. And I said, well, God, make that make sense, because I held on to what you said because it was you telling me, it wasn't the enemy. He said, but I used that as an example. The way you clung to it, even though you were wrestling with it, you still clung to it. Despite what others were saying, you still clung to it. Let me flip that from his perspective. He's getting this thought from the enemy, received this thought, came into agreement with this thought. That's not your wife. You're not to be married to her. You need to get a divorce. You're not happy. Your time is up. Even though I was the one telling him, like, no, God said, he's going to restore and divorce is not our portion. He still he clung to the fact he was still hell bent on believing he wanted a divorce. Even though doctors were telling me this can't not be, it's scientifically, like medically, all of that, this cannot be, I still held on to, I was pregnant. Do you see the two? So he was putting me in a position for me to later, much later, understand his perspective. So I'm like, God, why did you let it go on so long? He said, the fact that your husband was in delusion for such a long period of time, I needed you to walk an assignment out so you could get language for it, so you could get experience for it. So the fact that you were humiliated by what you believed in, the fact that you were devastated by still continuing to believe what others were telling you were not true, it is what your husband was going through. You're telling him y'all aren't getting a divorce. You're telling him you're hearing from me, and he's still back and forth, but he's still hell bent on holding on to he wants a divorce in spite of what I'm telling him. Remember I said God used my husband like Pharaoh. I was Moses. Everything the Lord sent me to tell him, he allowed my husband's heart to be hardened towards me for a purpose. God was doing a whole lot of stuff in one season and I had no idea. So he said, now, Synovia, think about when I graced you to come out of that. You had a lot of questions. You were embarrassed. I will say this. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Let me back up a little bit. When he did grace me to come out, and I, not my husband, my children, my family, because by that time they already thought I was crazy. But once I finally came into agreement with this isn't really happening, this isn't really true, I could never come into agreement with saying I heard wrong. I could never come into agreement to say I was led wrong. I just had questions. I knew it was God. I just didn't know why God allowed it and why God did it. But once I came into agreement with the fact that, okay, this was never true, I was never pregnant. Once I came into agreement with that, he was like, look at how your family never threw that back in your face. My husband, he did make me feel bad about it. I'm just keeping it real. He was like, but look at how they never brought it back up. But look at the embarrassment and shame that you carried, me, of going through something and having a family believe something for such a long period of time, only because I never even told them, hey, I'm doing this because God said this. Oh, never mind. 2.5 years later, it was just for my assignment. Like I never gave them any closure, right? For one, I was too embarrassed because I didn't have my own closure, if I could be honest. But the fact that none of my family never spoke about it again, they never brought it up. The fact that I wrestled with, I wonder what they think about me. I wonder how they feel. Like I had shame in times I was around them. Are they saying within themselves, like, well, what was she going through for that time? What would make her think that? What would make her believe that? I had to experience that because that's what he would be going through as well. Once he finally came into agreement, I didn't hear correctly. I was believing something that was untrue. I was believing that I wasn't supposed to be with my wife. I was believing that I wasn't supposed to be married to her anymore. I was believing that I was supposed to be single. Once God began to grace him to come out of that, right? The fact that he would be wondering those same thoughts. How is my family going to feel? The fact that I called my children in and told them one by one that I don't want to be married to your mother anymore. The fact that I told my children that I want a divorce. The fact that I told my children that I was moving out, like that type of thing. How are they feeling? Are they thinking within themselves, Daddy was crazy, my husband was crazy? You know, is the family having these conversations about me? Are they thinking that way about me? So what I was feeling from the assignment that I came into agreement with, only to look as if I came up empty-handed, would be the same way he was feeling. And I got angry when God revealed this to me, because I was like, Lord, it was one thing for you to have me go through all that for people that I don't know, right? Lord, these your people. I love y'all, but I'm just keeping it real. It's one thing for you to have me go through that for people that I don't know, but I get it, for your glory. You know, the assignment is bigger than me. Lord, I get that. But the fact that you brought it back up a year plus later to give me more wisdom, to let me know it was deeper, because not only, thank you, Holy Spirit, was it from my husband's perspective, it was from the perspective of all of those wayward spouses, all of those rebellious spouses, all of those spouses that were in a prodigal mindset. They heard something, they received something by coming into agreement with something that was not like God. They were hell-bent on believing it, despite the standard telling them this is not what it's supposed to be, despite others, oh, we're going to pray for your marriage and restore your marriage. I'm giving you guys an example. Despite others saying, no, you guys could work it out. And despite the wife or the husband, whoever the standard was, still trying to speak life into something that they're going to hold on to regardless. God was raising me up to use me in a way, not only to extend extra grace to my husband, to know that when God did release the scales from his eyes, I remember what that humiliation felt like. When God did release the scales from his eyes, I remember what that regret and that shame felt like. When God did bring him out of that and finally bring him into agreement with what's really true and not the false truth that he was holding on to, the shame, I had felt that. So God was using me not only for my one-on-ones, not only for Married to Purpose, not only for, my messages that I share on my social media platform. It went deeper to say, now you know how your husband felt as well. Even in restoration, now you know how he felt, so you can extend more grace. You know what that shame felt like. You know what that embarrassment felt like. You know what that humiliation felt like. You even know what it felt like, although you weren't in delusion. You could now understand how in darkness and how hell-bent he was on believing something, regardless of where it came from. He was hell-bent on believing something. You believed it because I told you, but I needed you. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I needed you to steward that assignment wholeheartedly, not half-heartedly, because had the Lord said, Synovia, you're pregnant, but it's really me having you walk an assignment out for those that you're called to, for your husband and for others, I wouldn't have walked that assignment out wholeheartedly, right? I wouldn't have felt the full extent of what I needed to feel. I needed to be in that assignment with 100% of my heart, not 50%, not 70%, not 30%. So it's not that God lied, because God cannot lie. It's just something he told me. He didn't tell me the full totality of it. He didn't tell me the full portion of what that was. He only gave me what I needed to know. Remember, I said sometimes God gives us things and speaks to us things on a need to know basis. You only need to know what I told you. You only need to know that you're pregnant, and I'm going to confirm that along the way, over and over. And when I say the confirmations were everywhere, I couldn't say that I never had a confirmation for that. The confirmations, the signs, me feeling like I felt fetal movement, me getting bigger. And I don't mean I was like getting fat. I mean my stomach round, hard. Like at that point, he was doing a supernatural thing. And it was so hard for me to believe it, because I had to come out of, let me believe this. This is spiritual, but God is saying I need to believe this, although my carnal mind, my natural mind, science, reasoning, logic, all of that is contradicting what God is telling me. But I needed to go through it with 100% of my heart so I could have the full language.